This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Weirding Way Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chasing Chevy Chase in a Chevy podcast, the podcast where we talk about Chevy Chase and the movies that he's been in. There's nothing that creative going on here. I mean, other than the fact that I, one of the hosts of this show, Chris Stasher, am joined by my two close compatriots in this journey through the filmography of Mr. Chevy Chase, one of the hosts, the host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
The pearl is in the river.
Wow.
I knew it. Whoever got picked first was doing that line. You find another one. I could say you dropped your diaphragm. Oh, that was number 2. Damn it. Okay, right. Let me find another one. Go ahead.
jeez.
Okay. Okay, I'll do this one.
And also, all the way from Cambridge and Washon and Wake Up Heavy, your friend and mine, he's Ed Begley's father, Mark Begley.
This looks like an aerial view of an unemployment line.
And because I'm sure you have no idea what we're quoting, because why would you? On this episode of the Chasing Chevy Chase in a Chevy podcast, we're going to be talking about a 1981's wildly problematic comedic film titled Under the Rainbow. So the film stars, like we've already kind of alluded to, Chevy Chase. It also stars Carrie Fisher, Eve Arden, and the one, the only, the icon himself, Mr. Billy Barty. And the film is, it's based on the creation of the film, The Wizard of Oz, and then it also draws inspiration from the plot of The Wizard of Oz, and then it also draws inspiration from the framing device of The Wizard of Oz. It's really inspired by The Wizard of Oz, and maybe not in the way that you would expect. And it's all about a hotel in Los Angeles across the street from the MGM studio and the convergence of several groups of people at this hotel. Yeah. That's a nice.
There's going to be lots of mix-ups in this.
Yeah,
I think
it's a comedy of errors.
Yes, my favorite thing.
So yeah, I will. This is one that I think the three of us were pretty excited to talk about because we brought it up several times, as in like, are we going to watch this? Is this something we're going to watch? So, Mike, I'm going to kick it to you first. What did you think of Under the Rainbow?
I used to watch this on cable a lot. And then it was pretty funny because as I was watching it again for the show, I barely remembered anything from this movie. I just know that I saw it a ton. I mostly remember, and this says a lot about me, I mostly remember Carrie Fisher in her underwear. That was pretty much my biggest memory of it was her in the underwear. And then maybe a little bit of the dog gag that we have going on through here, the dog named Strudel, that keeps either being killed or suicided, and the getting of a new dog. And apparently, and this doesn't really come through too well in the finished film, but Eve Arden as the Duchess, she can't see very well, so you can get any type of dog or even just a muff with a collar on. And I think they cut the muff diver line now that I think about it.
They cut a lot of those lines.
Yeah. But yeah, it was great to revisit this one. And just to see Mako in here, I really like him. And it reminded me of how much I liked Cork Hubbard when he was around. I was kind of oddly delighted going back and watching this movie, which I probably shouldn't be, because by all intents and purposes, this is a very bad film. How about you, Mark?
This was one of my first time watches. I remember when the film came out and it was universally panned, and I was pretty heavy into Chevy Chase at that time and all things Saturday Night Live. So it probably was something that I wanted to see and then decided not to. Or, I mean, I wasn't able to drive myself to the theater, but I probably just didn't push it on my mom or anything or anybody else to go see it. And I don't know how I would have taken it. I probably would have enjoyed it more back then as a kid than I did yesterday when I watched it for the first time. But it was interesting. I was surprised that 85% of it takes place in the hotel. I wasn't expecting that. I thought there was going to be more antics on the set of quote unquote The Wizard of Oz and other. I had no idea it was like spies and Hitler and the Japanese invasion and all that stuff rolled into it, and how all these different factions merge on this one hotel on the same day, and mix-ups ensue. So it was interesting, but this is probably not one that I'm going to go back to afterward.
I was getting a lot of 1941 vibes from it, especially the whole Japanese invasion thing.
I was going to bring that up because of the script and how that opening is changed drastically from what's in the script. And reading that part on the Japanese boat, I'm like, well, did they see 1941 and say, no, we can't do this? It's kind of already been done. Mm-hmm. Or was it just to simplify the story? Because most of the rest of that stuff is tossed out as well, other than the opening with Hitler.
Chris, what did you think of Under the Rainbow? Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
No, I was gonna pass it to Chris.
Well, Mike, we can no longer be friends. I am so deeply offended that you enjoyed such a problematic film. I mean, the usage of the word Japs and midgets, how dare they? No, in all seriousness, I mean, this movie was made in a time and a place where these kinds of things were not only okay, but I think, they were expected. And then on top of everything else, it's a period piece. So again, I'm not necessarily saying giving the movie a pass, but I understand what the movie's doing. I think the problem with the movie is, for the most part, it's not that it's, problematic or offensive or they said the word midget. It's just not funny for the most part. And there's like a lot of this movie that's not funny. The fact that Chevy Chase in this movie, why is Chevy Chase in this movie is my question. Like, why is Carrie Fisher in this movie? In a lot of ways, like they are not utilized to the fullest of their abilities, and the people that are fine. But the movie seems like it's a bizarre idea. I was sharing that I was watching this movie with a friend of mine, and they were like, "What the fuck are you watching?" And I was like, "Yeah, beats the shit out of me even." And by the end of the movie's framing device alone is so bizarre and so, again, like, it's so on the nose given what this is kind of talking about and the title alone is in reference to. It's so on the nose that by the end of the movie, all I could think was, and that's what you're doing? Well, fuck you then. Like, it's just... It kind of sours any modicum of goodwill that the movie has established. And modicum is the word I would use, because this movie is an hour and a half, feels like 2, and it's barely lands any of its comedy other than a couple reoccurring gags. But for the most part, like, I was befuddled by this movie's existence, because to me, the people that are in it at the time that they're in it, like, what? Wow. Good for you, I guess, but kind of feels like a little bit of a waste of Chevy Chase and Carrie Fisher's time. That's what I'll say. Just at the top.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Is it a bad movie? Hey, bad is so insanely subjective. I just don't think it's a very funny movie, which I think if we're talking about a movie that's billing itself as a comedy, that is a problem. If you're not able to actually elicit any response from the audience that's mildly meant to be, oh, that was humorous, so I'm going to laugh. Like, there was really none of that in this movie. It's unfortunate.
The script was interesting. I was very surprised by the differences between the script and the movie. And I think we're going to be hitting on this quite a bit as we talk about this, because that framing device of Kansas 1938 is not there. We do get the introduction of the Cork Hubert Hubbard character. He's part of it's more of a, I would say, a Hooverville than it is.
I was thinking Shantytown, but
yeah,
they called it something else on the script.
And we do get him eventually, but before we get to him, we have the introduction of that fireside chat that we see him listening to, and that's where we get introduction of the Chevy Chase character, Bruce Thorpe. And he's a Secret Service agent, and he's there with FDR, and it's very, very plain to me that they were thinking Chevy Chase when they wrote this script, because he is constantly fumbling and tripping. Throughout the entire script, he is tripping over his own feet or over curbs or these kind of things. And in this, he's trying to help FDR with the microphone, and he screws up the microphone, like these kind of things. I'm just like, well, this is Chevy Chase all over. And it was so odd that I think every single one of those pratfalls were cut out of the final version of this film, which then leads back to your question, Chris. Why was Chevy Chase in this? Because it could have been anybody. He is so white bread in this movie, and they don't play on his charisma very much at all. They just don't really play on Chevy Chase very much at all. For all intents and purposes, when you read the script, this is Carrie Fisher's movie. This is Annie Clark trying to wrangle all these things, and Chevy Chase, his character Bruce Thorpe, is just another obstacle to get in the way. And I think that the playing on the Duke and the Duchess, it gets old pretty darn quick, especially just the Duke being afraid of everything all the time. And yes, that does pay off later in the movie, but it also doesn't pay off. I think they make one mention of Sarajevo. It doesn't pay off that this is more of a historical movie in the script, that he is the son of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and that Robert Donner's character is the son of, and I apologize to my history teacher, I can't remember the name of the assassin that took out Franz Ferdinand, but he's that guy's son. So it's this historical conflict that we have entered into by having the Duke and the Duchess and then the assassin. And boy, oh boy, do they cut the assassin's role down quite a bit as well. Though I was laughing that it was Robert Donner playing an Italian with a very thick accent. But yeah, it was Robert Donner. And I love Robert Donner. Chris, we just saw him recently being asked all about the weather reports and if it rained last Tuesday on that episode of Columbo. I think he was in one of my favorites, Any Old Port in a Storm.
I just saw him on an episode of $6 Million Man playing
nice
baddie. So yeah, I was like, oh, him again.
But he'll never be anything for me other than Exodore from Mork and Mindy.
Yeah.
He's so good.
Every time he shows up, that's all I think of.
Oh, that was a perfect role for that guy.
And the other changes that they make that you've already alluded to with the Duchess's eyesight, because I read that script real quickly pretty much right after I watched the movie. And I'm like, did they mention the eyesight in there as to why she doesn't know it's a different dog or not? I can't remember now.
It's really brief. And I think it's just at the very first time we see her, she says like, oh, who is your friend or something like that. Like she doesn't know who they are rather than she can't see them. And then when she mistakes all the little people for children.
Right. But does someone explicitly say her eyes are bad? Does the Duke say that?
I don't think he does.
Because she asks.
No, she does. There's none of that in the movie.
she asks Chevy, is that your dog? And he's like, no, it's yours. So all the indication is that she can't see. But in the script, the Duke says she can't see and she won't wear glasses because she's vain.
Right.
And then, like we already mentioned, the Japanese opening being cut, and then the stuff with FDR is really just the fireside chat at the beginning. He's supposed to be in the finale, where that's part of why we've got all of the little people for the Munchkins there to have a parade and wave to FDR as he's driving by. And that's how the script ends, and all that's gone.
When we're introduced to, like you said, to Toho himself and Nakamori, who's played by Mako in this. And that's also, we get, again, it's so similar to stuff we've already seen, a whole tank full of piranha, and that he's feeding his piranha, and he's also got a parrot there. And at one point, Nakamori takes a photograph of the parrot, and that's what shows off and introduces the gun camera that can murder anything that he takes a picture of, basically, which of course comes back later in the film. But we don't know that. We don't know that he's holding a gun in his camera the entire time. So when he shows up and there's all of the Japanese tourists, we also don't know who he is. He shows up late to the movie. You're just like, oh, who is this new Japanese guy? Because it should have been a lot more funny that he shows up dressed exactly the same as all of these other Japanese men. And talk about just an overplayed cliche that your Japanese tourists really like to take photographs. So it's all of these, what is it, Chris? The Japanese Amateur Photography Society, right?
Photographic Society, yeah.
Oh my God.
The acronym, catch the acronym there, people, without us having to say it.
Wait, are you telling me
all this stuff.
It's not? You're telling me it hasn't aged well?
Hey, you thought murder by death was bad.
They set up all of these things before we get to the hotel itself. Yeah, we've got Hitler and little Otto, played by Billy Barty. Yeah, the whole thing too of when we've got the Hitler scene, they make a big deal about one of the guys that is there having only one arm. And I noticed that they actually have the guy there with one arm, but they don't do anything with it. It's like, what? Why is this guy even here?
I was waiting for the Harold and Maude salute from him.
Right.
See, I get that now. I just saw that movie for the first time. I finally get the little Harold and Maude salute thing.
I just watched it with my kid the other night.
Nice.
Yeah, we could just pivot and talk about that for an hour. And I would prefer that.
So much better. Much better.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, this movie has a lot of potential just on the face of it. Chevy Chase and Carrie Fisher, right? Like, we've seen Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn already twice, and they were fantastic together. Like, they were the centerpiece of the movies that they were in. And in Foul Play's case, like, that was Goldie Hawn's movie and Chevy Chase was just a part of it. And this could have been similar. I mean, to both of your points, like the idea that the script is the Carrie Fisher character, and and I think in a lot of ways the movie itself also is, because I think there's two stories kind of vying for control of the movie's attention. I think that, like, I have a hard time understanding how they bungled it this badly when they have two people that are so charismatic on screen. And whenever they're on screen together, I mean, especially there's a moment later in the film where they're locked in a freezer together. It is so not off-putting, but like it doesn't land the way that they want it to at all. And it's like, man, you guys really fucked this up, because Chevy Chase and Carrie Fisher, we know are known quantities and are good at what they do. So it's not them. And like, I think that's the thing, like, you know, with the conversation around like talking about movies and stuff, is really being cognizant of how many steps also go into a failure. And this is, you know, it took a lot to get to the point where this is the version of the movie on screen that we're getting with these two people. And it is wildly unfunny, and they are wildly like uncharismatic, and they have zero chemistry when they're on screen together. Like really none. It's surprising, because again, they're front and center on the poster, through all the advertisement, they're all over it. And like, they are not only really not great together on screen, but neither one of them are really in this enough to, I think, validate the amount of like usage that they have in the advertising for the movie. Like it really is the little people characters movie. It really is. And the Duchess and Dutch character, like, you know, the Duke, like it's their movie. Kind of feels like more than anybody else's.
Which is my least favorite part of the film, is that whole, because that's where a lot of those mix-ups come around with DeJello, I think is Robert Donner's character's name, trying to kill him. And those poor Japanese guys, they all get offed. That seemed kind of mean-spirited to me in a way for a lighthearted romp.
You could have just asked to hold the elevator.
Oh, yeah. Well, the guy that plays, is it Akito, the one who ends up getting the script from Carrie Fisher? I mean, he's a great guy. He's so nice. And I'm like, oh, well, he would actually be a really good romantic partner for Carrie Fisher's character, the way that he takes an interest in her job. And he's just like, oh, this is going to be a great film. And just seems like the nicest guy. And yeah, when he gets offed, it's like he ends up with his face in a plate full of guacamole. And it's like, oh, this is so disrespectful to this guy. And he and all of these other Japanese tourists end up lining up in that meat locker. You know, you got Tiny, played by one of the film's writers, Pat McCormick, taking this guy taking these guys in the meat locker and just leaving them hanging there because, of course, there's this whole thing of the boss is gone. And so the hotel is being run by the boss's nephew, I believe, who's played by Adam Arkin, a very young Adam Arkin. I forgot when he started in acting, because I just remembered him more from like Northern Exposure type of stuff. I forgot about all the pre-Northern Exposure roles that he had. I thought he was really good in this, and he does a good job. It does basically his dad's type thing of being this like put upon person, and he gets really upset about things. I've always liked Adam Arkin quite a bit, and this doesn't do anything to dissuade me from liking him.
I mean, he's playing the kind of character I would expect Adam Arkin to play in this movie, right? Like that. Yeah. He's great. And that's the thing. Like, we know, you know, all the actors in this movie are fantastic, and pretty much everything else we've seen them in. It's just what the writers have done is really, I think, I don't understand what they were thinking with some of this stuff, because it's too much going on at once. And like these kinds of comedies, I'm not saying they don't make them very much anymore, but they don't make movies like this anymore that are just like high concept and also just like all over the place constantly. Like there's so much going on. It kind of wraps itself in loops after a while. Like, okay, like, and then, but then by the way, this isn't actually all happening at all. And it's like, wow, movie, good God, like you've taken the final step here at the end. It honestly, it's one of these movies that feels like it thinks it's cleverer than it actually is.
You mentioned, I think in our message thread, about how it seems like jokes are unfinished. And I believe a lot of that has to do with toning down the raunchy humor of the script, because there are a lot more double entendres and racy comments. It's not, I don't know if they were afraid they were going to get an R or something or what, but it's pretty tame. There's no, like 2 swear words in the movie, maybe. And one of those isn't in the script because it's at the end of the film with a different ending. But there's a lot more of that talk between Carrie Fisher and Chevy Chase, where it's, you know, what's going on? What is that, your gun? Things like, I mean, that's in the movie, but there's other comments like that between them that are gone. And then the Munchkins, the actors that are going to play the Munchkins, are way naughtier in the script. And that the bringing the prostitute there, the sex worker to the hotel, it's more straightforward in the script where we know that's what's happening, but in the movie it's like they excised some of that, and there's just a shot of one of them walking out of the room and saying the line, and so it's sort of out of context now, like what's going on in that room. And all the stuff with Tiny in the script where the girls are after him constantly because he's this big huge guy, and they strap him down to the floor a la, what do they say? Gulliver's Travels, and had their way with him.
Yeah.
That's completely gone. Zelda Rubinstein confronts him on the staircase there, and that's about it. And so a lot is going on, but there are so many missing pieces that it's even more fractured, I think, than it would have been with that stuff in there. There is way too much going on, though. It's like I can't keep up with.
Yeah, it's very, very screwball comedy for me. But yeah, you really rob it of a lot of stuff by removing the setups or the punchlines. You know, I don't know if it was the editor, if it was the director, Steve Rash, who at this point had directed the Buddy Holly story in '78, which was, from what I remember, a pretty big hit, and also even earned an Oscar nomination for Gary Busey. He did a fantastic job of doing Buddy Holly himself. And then he also directed Rich Hall's Vanishing America in 1986, which I really like that a lot, but I think that was mostly because I like Rich Hall a lot. But yeah, this one, I'm like, what were you doing? Why were you cutting these things? Like to cut out so much of Annie's introduction, where you've got her on the MGM lot, and it was probably expensive, but they do get back to the lot later on, which again reminds me of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, where he's terrorizing the lot, and it should have been a lot more of that. But like her interacting with Clark Gable, the fact that guy who we see her talking to, that's Louis B. Mayer, and we kind of figure that out later on when she says Louis, and it's just like that guy could have been named Louis whatever, Louis Armstrong, whatever, but it's not. This is Louis B. Mayer asking for a favor, and this is going to get you, the next thing, move you up in the world type of thing. The fact that we're shooting Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz and all of these other films, they're not paying attention to that stuff. They're not setting it up that this is a big Hollywood story and that we're getting ready to shoot this massive film, Wizard of Oz, and we don't get Burt Lahr, we don't get any of these other people that are supposed to be there. She passes by at one point, Laurel and Hardy. She says that Ming the Merciless needs a helmet. There's just all of these things. Like eventually it's like, well, I guess that's Esther Williams, but we don't know. It's really tough.
If you hadn't read the script or are pretty knowledgeable about what was going on at that time in the movies, you wouldn't get the pool scene at the end. But
exactly.
It's introduced earlier in the script, like you say, and all that. Yeah, I had no concept that was supposed to be Louis B. Mayer until I read the script. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, does he even look like that? I don't know. You get the Clark Gable thing, you get the Scarlett O'Hara thing because they put a pin on it at the end. But and it seems weird to me that some of the specific Wizard of Oz things in the script are dropped as well, and I don't know if that's part of that. You can't say this, because they mentioned the Yellow Brick Road a number of times, but they never say Toto for the dog. They just say, are the dog auditions supposed to be in
dog
here? Yeah. And in the script, it's like, are the Toto auditions supposed to be, Homer asks when he brings all the dogs into the hotel. And I'm like, was that a rights thing? Were some of these other cuts rights things as well? Or just let's kind of dumb it down for the audience? Or I don't know. It seemed odd, though, that there were a lot more specific nods to the Wizard of Oz in the script. I mean, you've got Emerald City in the movie, but...
It's almost like, we're recording this on Super Bowl Sunday, but it's almost like all of the references to the big game, because you have to pay to use the word Super Bowl, and you have to be approved by whoever to use the term Super Bowl. So it feels very much like that. Like, we're making a movie about things that happen over a rainbow with Kansas, and there's a dog and there's a, lion, and it's, just like nudge, nudge, nudge. Like, okay, yeah, you're putting your elbow right through my ribs here. Like, please stop. I get it, but at the same time, I don't get it. And the other thing that I think really is a shame about this movie is that, I said screwball comedy. It's not screwball enough. Like, they say that there were 150 little people that worked on this movie, and I only really could tell you maybe about 30 of them. Like, it looks like there are about 30 people is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't look like you have 150 little people. It does not feel like this is a mass, because really towards the end, when they go back to the movie studio, it should feel like an invasion of all of these little people, and the hotel should feel like an invasion of all these little people. But there are certain times where it's like, oh, well, there's a couple guys here, there's a couple people over here, there's a woman and a man over here, but like, it doesn't feel like this mass of humanity. And that's what we should really get. Like, you get that, you mentioned the line about, the aerial view of an unemployment line. Like, okay, yeah, we have quite a few there, but it still doesn't feel like just a mass of people. And I don't know if that's because of the way that it was shot, or that we didn't have enough extras, that we just didn't have enough little people in these shots, but it just doesn't feel as chaotic. Like, this movie should be chaos and debauchery, but it's not.
And it's weird that it's a movie based on a urban legend, basically, of their bawdiness at this hotel that has been pretty much denied by everybody who's worked on the movie.
I wondered too about there's a scene when they get to the movie theater, to the movie studio, and somebody accidentally triggers a gallows and somebody hangs. And I'm like, okay, well, first off, they just murdered that person. Funny stuff. But then I'm also like, is this a reference to, there were those rumors for years and years of like, oh yeah, in the background, you can see there's a little person, they hung themselves. They were so distraught about working on the movie that they hanged themselves, and you can see them in the background hanging from one of the trees. I'm like, well, that would have been interesting, because there's even like a book, I can't remember, Stuart Kaminsky, I think, wrote it, called Murder on the Yellow Brick Road. And it's all about that, rumor of somebody being murdered behind the scenes on Wizard of Oz.
I had heard about that, and that's what I assumed that was in reference to, right? Yeah. What else?
Yeah, I think in the script they mention a specific Western, so I kind of went, post watching the movie, my mind just went back to that. But that's another thing that's missing, is that Chevy Chase riding on the horse of many colors.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's gone. I mean, he doesn't even chase them. Rollo does.
Exactly.
Well, and that's the other thing, like the Wizard of, you mentioned, Mike, like the Wizard of Ozness of the movie. And again, like they end up, I feel like where the Wizard of Ozness of the movie ends up really kind of revealing its hand at the end of the movie. It makes itself very obvious what the actual Wizard of Oz like point of reference is with the framing device of the movie. But yeah, it's like, what a wasted opportunity you have here. Like the end of this movie should have been a bigger version of what happens at the end of Blazing Saddles. Like that's what I was expecting. Like,
right.
And it's kind of that, but not it's like that if you watch Blazing Saddles and said, how can we do this, but not really put in the effort, like not really, like you said, make it as kind of over the top and as crazy as again, like as the movie wants to be, because as a slapstick screwball comedy, the end of the movie needs to be like the end of What's Up, Doc, where it's like this big thing through wherever, and like this movie has the notion of that. It understands that. It starts the process of getting there with that, but it never, I don't think it executes its hand the way it wants to, because again, I think it's ultimately about something else, and it feels like three different stories trying to get attention, and the movie ends on the story that is the least interesting of all three, which is the Rollo story. That ends up being the main story of the movie, and that's like the least exciting one of all three.
Well, he has his moments in the middle chunk of the film, but other than the opening and the ending, excuse me, it's not really his movie. He helps Carrie Fisher a couple of times get out of her issues with Billy Barty and that. And I mean, should we just get out there what the ending is?
For all the people that are really disappointed that we might spoil this movie for them.
As opposed to the FDR parade, which doesn't read that interesting in the script either, actually. They pull the Wizard of Oz ending where this is all Rollo's dream. And like you, Mike, I thought, oh, we're doing this, or whichever one of you said that. But it was a cheat because we didn't see all those people in that shanty town before.
But I heard Chevy Chase's voice at the beginning of the movie. I heard
now, was he the postal worker? That's the only thing I could think of, because they obscured the postal employee's face.
I heard his voice and I was like, that's Chevy Chase's voice. And that's when I realized, like, is something going on here? But like, I heard Chevy Chase's voice at the beginning of the movie and I was like, that's weird. It's like Harrison Ford in E.T. for no reason.
Yeah. Or was he, somebody shouts, doggone it. Somebody shouts off screen to him at some point, like, be careful, half pint. So it was either him, because I didn't bother to go back and watch the beginning, but I had that thought. I'm like, I think he's the postal worker or somebody else there, but we don't see the Duke and Duchess. We don't see Robert Donner. We don't see Carrie Fisher there. We don't see Tiny. None of the, I mean, unless they're, I guess I should go back and watch and see if their backs are turned or if there's people that they could be
their backs
in
are
that.
Turned. Yeah. Like I was rewatching it a little while ago and like you can see there's a couple of people that sit down in front of the radio and their backs are to us. And I'm like, okay. I think that's the Duke. And I'm not sure who this other person is. So yeah, it does very much feel like a cheat though. Because the obscure,
they're not hidden in makeup like they are in The Wizard of Oz. So you don't maybe catch that's Burt Lahr and the other guys and all that.
Right.
But you would know it was Chevy Chase. Like that's the problem. That's why they obscure it's Chevy Chase.
Because they're not going to be in makeup.
Well, it's much more of the joke of Fistful of Yen from Kentucky Fried Movie, where suddenly our main character is waking up and he's in drag and you have all those, and then you have the amazing what's the doctor's name, the bad guy, when he pulls out he still has the fake arm thing, that is hilarious. The way that they do this, there's no comedy to it. It's just a framing device that was not earned whatsoever.
Yeah, I thought a lot about the end of Kentucky Fried Movies, A Fistful of Yen, and like I thought about that because that was the last time that we had seen it, and like how strange, because it really does work there, like, and it's mined for some, like, that for me is probably the funniest part of that whole thing, like, because again I didn't resonate with it as much as y'all did, but like I loved that they used that there because it was funny there. Here it's just, to what end? Why? Like why? What comedic anything is being mined here? I fail to see what the point is, other than the fact that, like, well, the movie within the movie is about the Wizard of Oz, but like that's just somebody's dream is what we end up finding out. So like I don't understand it. It's very lazy to me is what it feels like. It feels like they wrote themselves into a corner and then just said, we don't know what to do with this. Oh, Wizard of Oz, there's an old dream. Like,
yeah, I think they simplified stuff a little too much to get to that ending.
Yeah.
Then that's why all that other stuff is gone. But the thing it reminded me of, which I sometimes feel is a little bit of a cheat, is Jacob's Ladder, and how one of the major complaints of that film is that it's a future for him that doesn't make sense because he wouldn't know these specific songs had been made since he's dying before they were ever created, which is, whatever, neither here nor there. But why would you dream about the making of the Wizard of Oz when you have no idea what that thing is? But it's a real thing that exists.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, unless he read the L. Frank Baum book, but yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. And the book is very different from the movie as well. Right. Yeah, even when it comes to, so this movie is set in 1938. We're talking about Nazis. We're talking about Japanese people. And, we mentioned 1941 already. The whole MacGuffin of this is this map that is, they were saying it was an invasion map of the United States. I want to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I want to say it's about Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. In the script.
In the script, right. Which makes a lot more sense, though Pearl Harbor is still 3 years away at this point. But at least this is like, oh, they have foiled this plot in 1938. They'll use the exact same plot in a few years and actually be successful about it in 1941. So I don't know how that works, but somehow that's what happens. And like, yeah, it should have been something more to that, because it really, those stakes are so low that you don't even care about them at all. You just know we shouldn't like Japanese people, we shouldn't like German people because of what's going on. And, you know, just it just kind of fizzles out, just kind of like what I'm talking about.
That was funnier than the whole movie.
Thanks.
The pearl is in the river. Another nice little, we got to get the, you know, Christmas story, can't say our L's bit in there too.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
I
get that
love
mistake.
It.
But what's weird about that is then he actually finds the real guy like 2 minutes later. So what was the point of that? And then, of course, like you mentioned, that poor Akito gets killed anyway for, I guess, no good deed goes unpunished. But yeah, along with the photography and all that other stuff, that was just another.
And the dog dying multiple times, the dog drinking the poison.
You know what would have been funny with that dog? What would have been very funny with the dog? They again, it's written better than it's directed. The whole thing of Bruce when he's trying to eat and the dog keeps barking at him whenever he tries to take a bite of anything. It would have been funny had that been Benji on the other side of the table barking at him.
Anything would have been funnier than what we got, right?
Yeah, like, that's true.
And that's the thing. Like, this is the first time I think we've watched something, the three of us, for this show that's like unfunny. Like, everything else has been like, oh, you know, seems like Old Times maybe wasn't as good as Foul Play, but seems like Old Times still had its moments. Like, this is I would say a deeply unfunny movie. Like, I think Oh Heavenly Dog was better than this. Like, and I don't think Oh Heavenly Dog is much better than this. I think Oh Heavenly Dog has its own like problems that we addressed ad nauseum on that episode. But I think at least there were moments where there was some comedy, even if it was unintentional. Here it just feels like almost all the jokes are happening off screen, and then we're coming back when they're like transitioning in between the jokes. Like, I don't know when this movie is supposed to be funny. It really, you know, you mentioned 1941, and I know that you and I might be in the minority in terms of.
I love that movie.
I know.
Oof. Wow.
Mark loves it. Mike, you and I think, might be in the minority of the people we know.
Oh, I don't think you're in the minority.
I mean, I know several people. I know more people that like it than don't. But I know that, like, in the grand majority of people, yeah, it's not like, you know, widely considered to be amazing.
It holds up. Watched it sometime in the last 2 years, and it held up for me, man.
I don't know if I'd rather watch this or that, but I will say that
I'd watch that 100 times before I watch this again.
Both of these
we're going to bring
movies
up 1941. I'm going to go to bat for it. So
that's fair. I just think both of these movies are deeply unfunny. At least this movie's not 2 hours.
Hey, man, you got to have the Tim Matheson and Nancy Allen story in 1941.
Oh.
It's key. It is key.
Just like the Eddie Deason stuff too. Yeah.
Him and Murray Hamilton. Yeah.
Just got to be there. Otherwise, the movie's not as good.
And that's the only stuff I wouldn't mind missing. But I do love the carousel going off the pier. I think that's some great miniature work. So I'm gonna say that stays in my version.
I mean, yeah, but that is the thing. Like, in terms of the movies that I would compare this to, 1941 is a apt comparison. I think this movie is as unfunny as that movie is, and I think in a lot of ways it feels like a perfect like a perfect companion piece, like a double feature, a diabolical double feature under the rainbow in 1941. Like, who's itching for that double feature? Not this guy.
You're gonna definitely get a lot more out of 1941, though. Even just the miniature work, the directions. I mean, it's still Spielberg.
It's a better 1941 is a better movie. It's just a longer movie.
Reed Williams in there getting an egg on his uniform. I mean, come on, who doesn't love that?
Oh, the general crying as he's watching Dumbo.
Dumbo. Yeah.
The whole blackface, whiteface thing with the
John Candy.
Aykroyd and yeah.
Mickey Rourke is in that movie.
Mickey Rourke is in it for a hot second.
And who doesn't love Mickey Rourke, really?
And of course, don't forget John Belushi just kind of being there.
Hey,
Yeah.
he says Fresno in that movie. I remember leaping out of my seat when I saw that at 10 years old. John Belushi said Fresno.
Mike, sometimes we can commiserate on things and sometimes we can't, but I'm glad one of those things that we commiserate on is 1940.
Oh, yeah.
That in Transylvania, 5,000, right?
I haven't seen 1941 since they put out that longer, what's it, a Laserdisc version of it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this and it's going to show me that there was a masterpiece here that was ruined by the studios. And this is going to show me just how funny this movie was. No.
I can't imagine a longer cut working.
Have you ever seen the longer cut? It goes on
I may have
forever.
years ago.
It's another half an hour longer.
It is.
Yeah, maybe not though. Maybe not. I may just be thinking of the TV edit.
Oh, see, now I like the movie, but I'm not willing to watch an hour longer version. How much do you really like 1941?
I just can't imagine that.
Yeah.
A longer version would be better.
And I can't imagine the 2-hour version is good to begin with, to be fair. But I think though, in terms of like the success of the storytelling, I think to your point, I think the scope of 1941 is more interesting. And I think that this movie's trying to have that scope. I mean, again, we have Hitler like 2 seconds into the quote dream sequence of the movie, unquote. But I mean, Hitler exists through the character of Billy Barty. And like, that's not, I mean, like, you know, all jokes aside about his size, like the scale of that character, like it doesn't feel like you guys were mentioning about the map. Like it just doesn't feel like that big of a threat. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of stakes with the movie for the most part, but like 1941 has those stakes. So at least you kind of have some stakes to it. I don't know. And that's the other thing about this movie. Like the best thing about this movie, we haven't really even talked about him, is Billy Barty. Like he's the best part of the movie. Like without a doubt, he's just like, he's fucking going for it and like, good for him. But I kind of wish the movie had just been all about his like weird Nazi midget character. Like it's such a fucking strange thing. And like the way he looks is so strange. And he's got the Hitler mustache and the monocle. It's like, this is such a strange thing. I'm totally into it though.
And it's so funny because, I mean, the Nazis actively were killing little people in World War II. I mean, there's a great documentary out there. I think it's called The 7 Little People of Auschwitz or something like that. Or it might be 7 Dwarfs of Auschwitz. I want to say Peter Dinklage is the narrator of it. And it's all about these little people that were living at Auschwitz and like trying to survive and, you know, trying to stay there longer so that they weren't put into the gas chambers. And it's kind of an awful thing when you think like, oh, no, Hitler would have totally been murdering Billy Barty rather than being like, oh, he is one of our best spies. He is the invisible man. No one can see him. He's so great. And yeah, and then he gets hit in the balls by a Hitler salute.
I mean, hey, you know what? Instead of watching the Super Bowl today, when I go over to my friend's house to watch it, I'm going to suggest we put on the Auschwitz dwarf documentary instead. And we all just...
Have I watched it? Yes, I have.
Hey, everybody, instead of the Super Bowl, let's watch the documentary about the dwarfs of Auschwitz. Does that sound like fun to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is ironic. I wish the movie would have acknowledged that fact. But, you know, again, I think just giving Billy Barty a little Hitler mustache is a lot funnier.
Especially when he is doing that with the Lollipop Guild outfit as well.
Yeah, those parts of the movie are funny. But that's it. Like, Billy Barty is the best part of the movie. Anytime he's on screen, the movie picks up for a moment because they're just like, hey, Billy Barty, go for it. Like, you're getting an opportunity to do a thing, and you're the villain of the movie. You're ostensibly like 3rd or 4th build in the movie. Like, go for it.
He's one of the leads.
Yeah, and he does. Like, he's the best part of the movie because he's going for it. And, you know, I know that, you know, if you do some research about the movie, you'll find that Chevy Chase supposedly was all sad because Doug Kenny passed away, which, you know what, now this is second movie that we're having Chevy Chase, for whatever reason, phoning it in. I mean, wasn't Oh Heavenly Dog him phoning it in too?
Like literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put the phone up to the mic.
Right.
I am a dog.
Say my lines.
Yeah. I
gotta lick my balls.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even though I'm a female dog.
But if that was what was going on, cool. But I don't think Chevy Chase phoning it in really is the problem with this movie. It is the writing and it is the script.
There's one distinct Chevy ad lib, and it's the second line that Mike quoted at the beginning. You dropped your diaphragm.
Right.
Because in the script, he doesn't say anything. He just says you dropped your ... And, you know, it's obviously not a diaphragm. It's a compact, but that feels, and the no rape, you know, no rape. I'm not raping you. It seemed like the only thing that he added to the script, really. Unlike Caddyshack, unlike Seems Like Old Times.
Everything else moving forward, like a lot.
Yeah.
Once he becomes Chevy Chase guy with nobody else needed, he will start doing that all the time.
And I will honestly say I kind of missed that and the pratfalls. I was waiting for the pratfalls the whole movie, and like Mike said, they're in the script. Maybe he was trying to get out of that.
Yeah, maybe he broke his hip or something.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's odd because I don't particularly care for that most of the time, but I kind of missed it in this.
Let's say we talked about it last time, and I think we were of the same mindset that nobody enjoyed it.
Yeah, it when it's so obviously fake and goofage. Oh, look at, I fell in the bush. Oh, I fell in the bank. Oh no.
Yeah, that was tough, man.
Yeah,
yeah, it has to be more organic. You know, because he was doing
and it hardly ever is.
Right. He was doing that in things like Foul Play, but by the time we get to Seems Like Old Times, it's like, okay, yeah, seems like old hat here, guys. Let's give it something else, just so that the we don't get too many tweets about this. It was actually Warwick Davis who narrated the 7 Doors of Auschwitz from 2013. As opposed to, there was a fictional film about the 7 Dwarves of Auschwitz. So, but yeah, and I forgot that
I can watch both of them. Is what you're saying?
Yes. And I forgot that Dr. Mengele was at Auschwitz and liked to experiment on these people. They were the Owitz, Owicz family. They were a musical act, and then they became victims of Dr. Mengele. So, good times, yes. So that's what was going on with little people in World War II. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The other thing that I found interesting too was this whole thing of,
I'm sorry, we're just gonna leave it on Dr. Mengele killed short people, but the funny parts of the movie now.
Well, I was going to say that also it's very interesting, the part where Corky, where Rollo meets up with all of the other little people. And that had me wondering, when you were a little person in 1938, how are you aware of there being other little people? Obviously, this is, maybe there were like newsletters or newspapers for little people, but it was just like, how odd would it have been? Like, picture yourself as a little person, you know, in that shanty town, in that Hooverville or whatever, and you've lived your life for all this time. How aware are you of other little people that are around? Because it is just such a small fraction of the population. It must be mind-blowing when you run into another little person, much less, and this is kind of where the crux of the whole movie is, much less hundreds of little people. And then you're suddenly like, no wonder there's debauchery and stuff, because it's like, finally, I found people my own size and we can party together. We can fuck. We can do whatever we want. We're all on equal footing now. We're not in this big person world. You know, I kind of like that idea.
That's like that. And that's what it should have been. And like, that's where the concept of the movie should have come from, not like trying to integrate it into something else, like trying to make it part of another story that should have been the main story that they're telling. Like the stuff with Chevy Chase and Eve Arden, like that gets in the way of telling that story, which is the more interesting story. Because the idea of like, oh, these people now have a, like, even if it is just temporary, they have this like moment in time together where they can do whatever the fuck they want. Like there is something to be said for that. And like you said, Mike, like there's a lot that could have been mined there and a lot of fun and interesting directions that it could have gone. And instead it's just like there's within the hotel, there are 3 separate movies going on, ostensibly. There's a spy movie, there's a weird assassination madcap movie, and then there's the Little People movie. And Carrie Fisher is in the Little People movie, which is why if this movie were more about them, it would just be more her movie, because she is the one who's actually tasked with making their lives easier while they're there for the Wizard of Oz.
It would have been more. I always assumed that's what the movie was about. I had no concept that looking at the poster or seeing it, through the years, that Chevy Chase is a Secret Service agent tasked with protecting a Duke and Duchess. I just assumed that he was another studio exec or maybe even studio security or whatever. I just assumed it was all about that rumor of them being wild and crazy during the filming of that. Have them be wild and crazy on the set, have them be wild and crazy. I mean, the set's right across the street, the studio lot, right? So why not have stuff of them actually shooting the movie? They probably couldn't do that. But yeah, the other stuff in there threw me for a loop when I was watching it yesterday. I had some indication because I know we looked at the script briefly during one of our other recordings, and I'm like, oh, what's all this? There, Hitler and the Japanese are in this too. Oh, it's but Chevy going to the Queen Mary to pick up a Duke and Duchess. I'm like, where is this? How does this all lead to the same spot? Them all on the hotel, which is supposed to be a fancy hotel, according to the script, but it kind of looks more like a rundown hotel to me.
Totally looks run down. Yeah, and that whole thing, like, we don't get enough Adam Arkin to know that he's losing his shit. I kind of like the one of the scenes that isn't mucked around with too much from the script to the movie is when Carrie Fisher's character is saying like, hey, listen, all this stuff is going on and I'm having all these problems, and she just rattles off all this stuff. And then she's talking with Chevy Chase, and he's like, okay, and they just kind of go off on their own thing. And then Adam Arkin's character comes in, Henry, and he's like, listen, I'm having all these problems. And he basically says the same thing. And Chevy Chase says, oh, this is where I came in, and then leaves the room. I was like, oh, well, that was kind of funny. These two characters are having the same problems, and they're both rattling off all of these details. All right, that's pretty good. But yeah, it doesn't really work with the rest of this. He should have been much more him stuck on the chandelier. I thought was a good thing for him to have happen, because it also gets him out of the way a little bit. But again, there's not that many little people around. It feels like most of them have already left and have run over to the studio at that point.
Well, that was a confusing part for me, because she keeps saying you need to get to the studio, and it's like they're having dinner. They're going to go to the studio in the evening and get fitted, but they're not going to shoot until tomorrow. It really seemed, and it matched up with the script pretty well. That seemed odd to me. Like, we're shoehorning this in because we've already established that this is about the Wizard of Oz. So we've got to have them. I've got to be wrangling them and getting them to the studio. And then they come straight back in their costumes and continue to party. And why is one of them is there a cowboy in the Wizard of Oz? Is there a cowboy munchkin?
No, but
because that guy's dressed up like a cowboy the whole time.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing. It's like each one of these munchkins are supposed to have their own personalities. So there's the one called Smokey, who ends up being the mayor of Munchkinland, and they call him Smokey at one point, but he had a major thing in the script. It was like, oh yeah, Smokey, he's doing this, he's doing that. Yeah, like you've got the ventriloquist guy, and the whole thing of like the ventriloquist dummy actually seems to be aware of things. Like the dummy can listen to conversations and then report those back to the ventriloquist, which is odd, but it might have played as funny. And then you're talking about the whole thing with the costumes. Like, yeah, you get Billy Barty and you get Rollo, both of them wearing the Lollipop Guild type costumes. You get Smokey wearing the mayor costume. And then what should have been a funny joke was, for whatever reason, Tiny takes the second dead Japanese guy into a bar, puts him on a stool. And that's also something that is missing, is that Tiny is a raging alcoholic and he's not supposed to be drinking this whole weekend, but yet we just constantly see him drinking. And he sits the guy down on the bar stool. The frickin' mortician who says, not only is she merely dead, but she really most is sincerely dead from The Wizard of Oz. He's the guy who says, I don't think you can help this guy at all. And I'm like, that's supposed to be funny. There's supposed to be a joke here. He is a mortician and he's supposed to be, but they cut to him so quick and it really doesn't register who he is, what he is.
I had no idea. That didn't register with me at all.
Right? But that should have been a funny joke.
Yeah, and he should have recited the line.
Exactly.
Which they probably couldn't do.
Exactly.
For whatever reason. And it's like, why are we having this revolve around the Wizard of Oz if you can't even use specifics other than the title? Because that's also the title of the book, which is probably in the public domain. And that missing stuff, I think, is what really hampers the film. Those what was the point of that? And I think the dummy gets a little extra scene in the script as well, where he's in the window of the sex dungeon that they have Tiny trapped in.
Right.
And then Billy Barty and Mako supposedly knock him off or something, and he's committed suicide. The dummy's committed suicide, and just weird stuff left out, and the stuff that's left in, they didn't reshape to have it make sense.
That's really, I'm not going to say that had they filmed that script exactly as it was written, especially because this was a first draft, I believe, from July of 80, if memory serves. Had they shot that exactly the way it was, it would have been a funny film, would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been a masterpiece, but it would have been way better than what we ended up with.
Yeah, it would have connected some of the dots, and I think I would have actually appreciated a little bit more of the raunchy humor. Because it seems kind of castrated when you watch and read that back to back. It's like, it felt like there was stuff missing, and now I'm seeing what it was that was missing. Because I expected, they show a naked lady at the end. You see Bush. It's brief, but I'm like, were they scared of an R? And that stuff got cut out or just not used at all, or what? Why show women in a shower if you're going to cut out all the entendres?
Yeah, that was weird, the whole shower thing. Yeah.
I'm like, are we going to get some early 80s PG nudity here? Yep.
Yeah.
Breasts and Bush.
Yeah, you get the joke of a little person being under a woman's skirt, but you get that in the Gone with the Wind sequence rather than the movie ending with one of the little people being under Annie's skirt, and then a whole line of little people that goes around the street. And I guess it's all of the, what is it? All the people want to look up her skirt or something? Is that what's going on? That's so strange. That's how the movie ends in the script, Chris. There's no flash over to Kansas. It's like all of these people underneath Annie's skirt. And then also, I forgot that there's a rainbow that shows up, and Rollo and his girlfriend, Lana, who is barely in the movie at all. She's one of the Lullaby League characters, that they follow the rainbow and find a fucking pot of gold in a bunch of bushes. And Rollo ends the whole movie saying, well, I'll be a son of a bitch.
Yeah. Yeah. Lana's another one that gets cut. Yeah, her part gets way reduced.
Poor Lana.
It's not that big in the script, but still, she has a lot more lines and a lot more to do. And
I'm so disappointed that wasn't the ending of the movie.
I can tell.
The FDR stuff is gone, which is fine.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a bridge too far at times, where it's like, and all of this is coming together because of FDR coming to town. Okay.
Right. And
there's
a parade.
An assassination. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm right. And then that's how Mako and Billy Barty kill each other. It's the same kind of setup, but, or no, it's not something. One of them gets killed. I guess it's Billy Barty because he is there to assassinate FDR. And that whole plot line is gone. It's just the handoff of the map, but he gets killed at the end.
Right.
In one of the same kind of mistaken ways.
Yeah, you get that nice moment of Mako and Robert Donner, Mako taking the photo, which reveals that it's the killer camera, and then Donner at the same time shooting Mako, like, because the Duke ducks down and the two shoot each other. It's like, oh, okay, that was kind of effective.
Yeah.
And then the thing where Chevy Chase's character is like, oh, this guy saved the Duke, even though he was there to murder the Duke. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, okay.
good job, Chevy.
Yeah, real good at your job there. And like, had they had something about him either being good or bad at his job, and it seems like he would have been bad at his job based upon the pratfalls and the screwing up of the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
But as it is, we don't know if he's good or bad. He just seems to be there, and that's his whole thing in this movie, is he seems there.
And that's the shame about this movie. And, you know, to go back to the idea about what this show ultimately is about, and it's about us talking about Chevy Chase, he is, of all the people in the movie, like, he's just lost in the shuffle like everybody else. Like, I wouldn't say he's more lost in the shuffle than anyone else, but he's as lost in the shuffle as everyone else is. And again, there's so little about the role that makes me think like, oh, it's Chevy. It had to be Chevy Chase. Like, nope, not really. Like, it could have been anybody. And I wouldn't say that's the case for Foul Play, or even Seems Like Good Times, you know, or Seems Like Good Times, Seems Like Old Times, or even Caddyshack. Like, those movies, I think, really benefit from it specifically being Chevy Chase. And this movie should have, and it didn't. And that for me is the biggest shame, because again, given what this show is about and given what the focus of our show is and the name is, this is barely a Chevy Chase movie. And his inclusion in the movie does not do much to spark any sort of joy while watching the movie. Frankly, all it makes me think is, why were you even involved?
Can't believe you Maria Kondo'd Chevy Chase.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, it's a great phrase.
I liked the Texas switch with Otis and the elevator crashing.
That was nice. I kind of like that the elevator operator's name is Otis. That's
Right.
kind of funny to me.
Us old-timey guys know what that is in reference to.
Anybody who's walked into an elevator and looked down, they should know, hopefully.
Yeah, that's where you don't want your phone or your keys to fall through, is where that little Otis sign is.
Yeah. I've had so many coworkers where it's like, it was almost like magic. It just got sucked through that little thing.
I keep my keys and my phone in my pockets. It's a irrational fear of mine that it's going to fall out of my hand and just slip right through that crack.
That's an irrational fear of mine as well. Also, my phone is going to fall into one of those sewer drains.
Yes.
Here, let me just walk over this thing where the thing that I have in my pocket is perfectly shaped to fall.
Just right through.
Yeah.
We all text down here.
Yeah. Hiya, telephone. Yeah, Jesus.
Hiya, Chrissy. You want your telephone back?
So it's handing it back through the thing. Yeah, that's it for
You
the
forgot
20.
your telephone.
That's
Your wife's
20%.
gonna be mad at you.
That's 21st century it right there. Instead of a phone, he loses his cell phone.
You can't watch TikTok on this, Georgie.
God.
You didn't pay the $5 for insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
No more Roblox for you.
God. Oh.
What's our next movie?
And on the next episode of Chasing Chevy Chase and a Chevy podcast, we're going to be taking a detour, a future detour, as a version of Mike White once said in a version of the show you did not get to hear. From 1998, a film that is not really a Chevy Chase vehicle, but he is in it for a little bit, and it's a Bob Saget directed Norm Macdonald vehicle known as Dirty Work that I am excited to watch because it is a favorite comedy of mine. And I mean, who doesn't love Norm Macdonald, right? I mean, you know, how many movies get to be a Norm Macdonald vehicle? Like one, like this
And
one.
I've never seen it. Another one I've not seen. So
I've never seen it either. I was getting this mixed up with Dirty Deeds. Was he in that movie? He
That's an
being
AC/DC
Norm
song.
Macdonald.
Yeah.
Right. But there was a movie called Dirty Deeds from, I think it was,
Is that the
Wow.
Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen movie?
no, that's Men at Work.
yeah.
I want to say that was from like the 90s, but I know there's one with Milo Ventimiglia that's also called that.
Wow.
Yeah. But no, I thought that there was one from, the 90s, because I remember the trailer for it when I was working at Blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, Dirty Work is a movie that I'm really excited for y'all to see. I'm not sure how well it's held up for people other than myself who like saw it in a time where like these kinds of movies were acceptable, and now it's like maybe not so much anymore. These kinds, I mean, like even with Under the Rainbow. So I know that Dirty Work is a little bit of maybe a stretch for this show, but we're going to be talking about it anyways. And yeah, if you don't like it, too bad. So until then, where can people find you and the things that you work on, Mr. Mark Bagley?
Well, you can find me. You can find me on social media, all social media at Wake Up Heavy, including Letterboxd if you're interested in what I'm watching. And you can find my shows, Wake Up Heavy and Cambridge and Sean, over on weirdingwaymedia.com or on my website, wakeupheavy.com. How about you, Mike?
Well, you can find me. Yes, I'm also on a lot of social medias, including Blue Sky and Threads. Sure. Why not?
and Truth Social, Mike, don't forget.
And Truth Social. Yes, I'm spitting a lot of truth bombs there. You can find all about how Taylor Swift is controlling the Super Bowl, and that everything has been set up this whole time based upon the color usage in NFL graphics to talk about the Super Bowl. Yeah, I've got all of those things. Or you can hear me talk about, yes, or you can hear me talk about movies over at projectionboothpodcast.com, where every week, I'm spitting truth over there as well, and giving you all the facts about Taylor Swift's Eras Tour and all the hidden messages inside of that movie. How about you, Chris?
You doing an episode on the Taylor Swift movie would be somehow at the same time the worst and best thing I can think of at the moment. I have seen that movie, and it is a 3.5-hour concert movie. I mean, cool. I've seen better concert movies, folks. And there's my 5-second take, and I don't ever have to do one. So you can find everything else that's not 5 seconds over at the Culture Cast and various other things that are found at weirdingwaymedia.com, including this show and a lot of other stuff, just a lot of things that I'm on or I produce or I work with other people on. So yeah, weirdingwaymedia.com is where you can go to find this show, all those shows, and pretty much everything Mike and Mark just mentioned. So like, rate, and review the show wherever you get it, more than likely iTunes, and share it to Chevy Chase. We'd love to hear what he thinks about what we think about his stuff, given that, it seems like Chevy Chase is just still kicking it, which is cool. Like, he's still just hanging out, enjoying himself. I saw him on a podcast a while back. Like, good for him, right? He's right.
He's still alive.
High bar have crossed at this day and age. We'll catch you on the next episode.